Hello, and welcome to another one, in fact, of Marriage on a Tightrope. I'm Alan.
I'm Katie.
And we're still married. Katie, last night happened.
And last night was awesome.
It was. We had our first meetup since before COVID. The one that we've hosted. We did the post-Mormon group down in St. George, but we were not hosting that. We hosted this one. We should say that we did not really host it.
Brian hosted it.
Brian hosted it at Alianza in Pleasant Grove. Beautiful Pleasant Grove.
Okay, the building was beautiful. It was just the perfect venue. There was tons of seating available and lots of space to mingle, and I was pleasantly surprised to see both people we knew, but lots of new faces.
Yeah, lots of new faces. We had somewhere between probably 70 and 80 people come, which was awesome to see. And, a few people would introduce themselves, and they've been in it for 6 months or for a year. And so it just is a reminder to us that, again, and to all of you, that there are people constantly and continually entering this space. For better or worse, that is the reality, which I think it gives us some motivation to keep telling stories and to allow wonderful people like Matt and Laura Hunter, who you're about to hear in a 2-part series, about their story as well.
Before we get to that, we wanted to make a couple of announcements.
Number one.
The first one is that we are going to be having a women's retreat. Yay! And we have a beautiful venue, thanks to Brian. We are going to be using his 5th floor beautiful building, and that's in Pleasant Grove, Utah. So I will get more information out to you. It'll be amazing. It'll be everything you wanted and more. I shouldn't promise that, right?
It will change your life.
This is going to be for anyone. It can be, it'll be for wives. So active believing members, nuanced, anyone that's in between, people who are post-Mormon but are in a mixed faith marriage, this is for you. So hopefully the content we provide, the activities we provide will allow you to, one, meet other people. I think that everyone needs community. That's why couples come to these events, like last night, is they want to meet other people who live by them, and they want to make friends. And that's not easy to do in any setting other than this one, where you're in a room full of people that are just like you. So that's one of the main goals of the women's retreat, is for people to meet each other and get to know one another and feel like there's community there. But also, of course, is the emotional well-being, and we'll go through all of that. Again, I will announce the lineup, if you will, of what we will be doing, but put it on your calendar. I know people have already told me that they're coming from out of town, like out of state, to come to this. And so there are going to be a limited number of spots. We are going to try and make it as cost effective as possible. Luckily, we do have a venue, but we want to make it so that everyone can come. So I'm excited.
I'm excited for you.
And then, Alan, what are we doing on November 14th?
On November 14th, we've been asked to present at Thrive, which is a predominantly post-Mormon event for those that have either left or are leaving the church. And we've been asked to present a 15-minute, very concise, from the main stage, which is a little nerve-wracking. There's like 2,000 people at this event, about how to maintain and even strengthen relationships with those who still believe. So that is the topic of our conversation.
This will be like a TED Talk. Not a whole lot of spitballing back and forth, right, Alan?
That's right. It's going to be very scripted, which I'm not good at.
Well, he's just not used to being scripted, is what I would say.
You can't hold me down with no script. Well, but we are excited to do that. We'd love to see you if you'd like to come. Katie, how would you feel about if you're a believer and you're thinking, oh, maybe I should come, What do you think?
Okay. So
viewer discretion is advised.
If you are brand new to this and you are the active believing member, I would probably say that you could pass on this one. If you're going to go and you're going to support your post-Mormon spouse, then you could totally try it. I will tell you that I have been to Thrive, the main group one, a couple years ago, and it was a little awkward for me. It was a lot awkward for me. I'm not going to lie. It was awkward for me, but people were so nice. It's not that I didn't love seeing people and talking to people. It's just that some of the things that were said were hard for me. I think, though, that Thrive is trying to move in a direction of how to thrive after Mormonism, hence the Thrive, but really not focus on the why people left, but focus on the, the recovery from it and how to rebuild whatever type of faith or whatever type of thing that you want to move on to.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. I think even if kind, loving language is used, the audience that the messages are built for are those that have left. And that can be uncomfortable, knowing that you're not the target audience. And some of the things that are said, even if they're said in love, can be difficult when you feel like, I'm the minority in this room.
Sure. So
it's like sacrament meeting for me.
It's reverse sacrament meeting.
It's reverse sacrament meeting. That's right.
So if you want to come to that and you just don't feel comfortable or whatever, like, please reach out. Alan and I will most likely, if we're not on stage, we'll probably be in the hall, because what usually happens is we get caught up in conversation when people see us and want to talk to us and everything.
They've offered us a booth to be able to be at when we're not in the main room during lunch breaks and whatnot, so that we can meet people. I think that would be good. We don't have like handouts or anything that we advertise.
Maybe we need to step up our merch game. Oh, Alan, we could totally sell like T-shirts or like bumper stickers or something. Hold on.
Because people really love advertising the state of their marriage.
Hold on. But the tagline could be ... and we're still married.
Uh-oh.
Come on.
Okay.
Who out there is merchandise and who can slap that?
We just need to design that. Let's just go on to Fiverr. We're going to figure this out. And to be
and
honest,
we're still married. That would be awesome.
That would be a ellipses. ... We're still married.
And we're still married.
That's good. We will also be honest that we are jumping on week 3 of our 6-week course with Natasha Helfer and 25 couples in about 100 seconds. So we've got to go.
We got to go.
We've got to go. Oh, can I give one last teaser?
Okay, sure.
Okay. This is super hush hush, so don't tell anybody. All right, everybody. We had a call with Mr. David Osler, who wrote the book Bridges, and he is asking if we would be willing to help him.
You're talking in a quiet voice.
I know. It's suspenseful.
It's a secret. Okay.
It's a secret. He asked us if we'd be willing to help him write a chapter for Bridges, the 2nd edition on mixed faith marriage, and this would be the only addition to the section, or the only addition to this edition of the book. So he's making a 2nd edition because he feels like he missed out on a huge group of people. All of y'all who are listening, we're super excited to help him with that. More details to come. It should be done in just a few months.
Yay!
Woo!
Okay, with that, here is our interview with Matt and Laura.
And now we are joined by Laura and Matt Hunter. Welcome to Marriage on a Tightrope.
Thanks. Thank you.
Yay.
We're excited to be here with you.
Yeah, I know. This is one of those, we're excited to be here. We're not terribly excited we're in this situation, but here we are.
There you go. Yeah.
Exactly. You know, Katie, I love the question that you ask a lot of couples right when we get started, the why in the world question.
Yes. Why in the world did you want to come on the podcast and tell your story?
You want me to answer that?
Yeah.
I think, finding your podcast was super kind of life-changing for us. It was incredibly helpful, and I felt so alone for the last year. Just anything that I can do or we can do to help others know they're not alone. And I think we're a little different. I don't know, everyone's different. Nobody's the same. But I just thought if there's someone else who's had a similar background to me, that I just wanted to be able to connect with people and help them to not feel alone.
Yeah, probably a little different perspective with our story, hopefully. So,
well, that's a good teaser. I'm interested to know about the background. Thankfully, we start with the background. So, we're excited. This time is yours. Katie and I, some of the couples that we interview, we know ahead of time, whether they've taken the course with us for 6 weeks, like our last interview with Tara and Tyler, or like you, Matt and Laura, that we don't know your story yet. And so we learn with the audience. And we're really looking forward to it. So thank you once again for being brave to be here. And go Cowboys, I'm pretty sure, Matt, right?
Correct.
That's right.
Correct.
Yeah.
Dak Prescott. And that's all I can do. So there you go.
That's all you need. That's all you need.
That's all you need.
We're
Great. Wonderful. Well, hey, let's dive right into it and talk a little bit about your upbringing. Now, I understand that usually we hear about what is your background with the church and your upbringing. But Laura, you let us know that you are a convert to the church and you joined the church in college. Am I correct?
That's right. Yeah.
Great. Well, let's start with you and talk about your upbringing out of the church.
Okay. All right. So I grew up in Dallas. Dallas area. I was born in Dallas, and my mom, my dad, I have one sister, and we were a very Christian family. I spent the first 10 years or so of my life in a Church of Christ, which is, I'm not sure how familiar y'all are, but the Southern Church of Christ is kind of from a restorationist sect. So, they were sort of trying to recreate the primitive church, if you will. So, I would say on the branch of, if there's a tree of, Christianity, it's on the far right conservative branch, as far as you can get. And there's definitely a wide spectrum of those. So we went to that church. And so to give you some examples, it's if you don't find it in the New Testament, it's not part of the theology. So there were you couldn't use instrumental music at all because there's no mention of instruments in the New Testament. So everything was a cappella. And any special musical numbers or singers that had to be from the back of the chapel area, because you couldn't be looking at the people.
I'm so confused. You can't look at the people singing?
Right. Yeah. They had to be in the back of the auditorium, chapel, sanctuary.
It can't be a performance.
Right. It couldn't be considered a performance in any way. So,
and that's because performing isn't mentioned in the. I know that this is not a deconstruct the church that you grew up in podcast, but
just super interesting.
It's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, it is kind of fascinating, right? So I don't totally understand why that was, but I don't totally understand everything in the LDS church either. So what are you going to do?
Right.
I don't really know exactly why that was a thing, if you will, but it was just part of the church culture. And we were super active in that, if you will. That wasn't a word that you would use in that culture, but so my dad originally was, going to school to be a preacher, and he changed his trajectory and was studying math and stuff. And so that wasn't where things ended up for him. But when I was in late childhood, we did something called Bible Bowl. So all of the churches of Christ in the area would get together and compete, and the teenagers would do Jeopardy quizzes on Bible trivia and knowledge and stuff.
Nice.
Maybe that's why we should probably just tell you I'm kind of an intense person, and maybe that's why. I don't know. Everything is just kind of a lot for me. I'm a little bit extreme. So I don't know if that experience spiritually and just emotionally, I think kind of affected me that way. So then I think we kind of changed churches, and my dad went to the most liberal Church of Christ he could find. And when I think more liberal with regards to theology is what I mean. And we went there, and they kind of started out as the same thing with regard to Church of Christ theology, but I don't know if the church went through a faith crisis or something itself, but it just totally changed. Like we started there and there was no instrumental music. And then I remember like we did the Christmas pageant one year and they wheeled in a piano and it being like a really big deal. Like everyone was like super excited. There was a piano there. And by the time I was in late middle school, we had like a full band with drums and there were people like just kind of like jumping up in the middle of the services, like speaking in tongues and no like interpreter or anything, just kind of interesting stuff happening. Yeah. And then they just kind of started bringing in like different sorts of teachers and things. And one, when I was about 13, I want to say, no, I must have been a little older, but anyway, there was a youth meeting that we attended and they brought in this female teacher who we'd never met before. And she exorcised the demon out of me, which was weird. So
and good. I mean, that's a good thing.
Then this was, I mean, thankfully before she met you, right, man? I mean, you had to get that demon out first.
I'm very grateful.
How did they do that?
How did that work? And how did that make you feel both then and now?
Yeah, it was really interesting. So my parents were separated at the time and going through a divorce, and my sister and I were at the meeting and we're just really struggling emotionally with that, I think. And she just had some super crazy teachings she was sharing and then decided that our emotional sadness was due to a demon. And she like laid her hands on us and said a super intense, crazy prayer. There was a little like talking in tongues happening and I felt really frightened. But it was kind of a spiritual environment, a church environment where like they sort of valued displays of spirituality, if you will. And so I remember being really frightened. And then after it was over, there were people like almost like congratulating me or like, wow, that was so cool. Like after. And I've always been kind of, unfortunately sort of influenced by like external validation. So I was like, oh, maybe this was cool. I was like 13, maybe 14 at the time. And I was like, oh, I guess maybe this was a good thing. I remember like our youth pastor kind of like hugging me and being like, wow, that was so amazing. And then we went home and talked to my mom and I still remember the look on her face and she was like, oh my goodness. Like I was like, this thing happened and it was so weird and like almost kind of like excited, like weird feeling. And so my mom was like, oh, I don't know about this. And that was about the time that she was like, okay, we need to find a new church. There was just like no sort of structure, I guess, if you will, which will come back around to change things. So do you want to talk about your childhood a little bit before I keep going? I feel like, why don't you talk about?
And before we pass over to Matt, looking back, Laura, in your upbringing, you changed churches a couple of times. Overall, how would you say your religious upbringing was for you qualitatively? Like, was it a overall positive influence in your life? Did you feel like it was traumatizing, or what was it? What would you to kind of define it as?
I think that so my mom is like amazing and was deeply spiritual in our home, and I felt like I had a very deeply spiritual upbringing. While I did have some strange experiences, I felt really connected to Christ, like to Jesus during that time, and I felt like I knew him and I loved God. Like I loved all of it, but it was just my life. So it didn't seem abnormal at the time to me, those parts of it. And there, I'm telling you like the odd things because there was a lot of like wonderful and good to it. I love the hymns that we sang and I love, I think I remember like feeling the Holy Spirit at like 3. I really do. Like my mom is a singer and she would sing hymns all the time. And I definitely feel like I learned a deep sense of spirituality and connection to God. And so, but I do think that I think it was a wonderful experience, but I also had those experiences that I mentioned, I think fed into kind of the trajectory that I took as I got older, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And so, yeah. Why don't you tell us about when you were a child?
That is a good point to switch over to Matt, because then when we come back to you, Laura, we can talk about the switch.
The switch.
Yeah.
Matt, let's hear it.
Yeah. So,
were you born of goodly parents?
I was born of goodly parents. I'm also large in stature, so we.
I didn't want to risk calling you fat, so thank you for.
Yeah, born and raised in the church. Mom and dad were also born and raised in the church, so yeah, nothing too exciting there. I was Air Force, military brat, and so we moved around everywhere when I was young. But my dad retired up here in northern Utah when I was in second grade. So from second grade on, I'm pretty much just a Utah Mormon. But I do come from a long line of members of the church. So it's kind of interesting. We figured this out just, a couple years ago, that if you look on the church's website of the history of the church, early missionary work, you can see some of my ancestry. So
it's under American Indians, like in the church history topic. Mm-hmm. So like to cover the controversial topic of like American Indians, his great grandfather's mentioned in there. Yeah. Because he's a quarter Native American.
Yes.
Oh, okay. So your great grandfather was Native American.
Yes. Yeah. He was actually you can read about it. It mentions the Catawba tribe, in South Carolina, and that's, my tribe. So my great grandfather was the chief of the tribe, actually.
Wow. In South Carolina.
Yeah.
So was this, I love this history stuff. It's so much fun. Did he find the church through missionaries that went to South Carolina?
Yes.
Wow. And was that missionaries coming from Utah?
Probably. They baptized almost the entire tribe. Is the story that is told and that's mentioned on there. And then his name was, well, I guess we don't. We just told you where you can find it. But yeah. It's Samuel Taylor Blue. And and he spoke at General Conference. They share like a quote from his address there on just how he came to have a testimony of
right.
Church, and he had like the whole tribe gather around and listen to the missionaries and stuff.
Yeah. And Matt, you just found this out a couple of years ago?
Well, I knew that history, but I just found out that it was mentioned on the church's website. So pretty cool.
Wow. Okay.
That's really cool.
Yeah, that's neat.
So not pioneer heritage, but at least we go way back.
You do have pioneer heritage on your mom's side.
Yeah. Right? Just not a long line of, both sides, I guess.
Right. Yeah.
Right. Okay.
But yeah, pretty normal childhood. Made the right choices for the most part, I guess, if you would consider whatever.
Yeah, quote unquote, what the right choices are. Right. Well, we have to do a litmus test of just how LDS your family was.
When you went on vacation, did you go to church?
No.
Okay.
Cool.
Did you have caffeine in the house?
Yes.
Okay.
All right. I could dig with this family. This is good.
we occasionally went to KFC on Sunday, so
hey,
that's a measure.
Right. And you're still active?
I know.
So tell us a little bit about what the church meant to you growing up.
Yeah, I mean, it was just life. I mean, all the neighbors and friends and we're all members, seminary crowd, and I was a choir boy too, and so it was just life. I mean, in this culture, you just live it, You have your midweek activity and your weekend activities and your camps, and so. Yeah, it meant a lot to me. growing up.
So if you're a choir boy and knowing about what age you are, were you one of the stars of the road shows growing up?
We did do road shows, yes.
I missed the road shows, I'll be honest. Oh, that's fun.
Right after high school, went on my mission. And that's kind of where Laura and my stories converge.
So you went to Texas? Is that?
I did.
Okay. So maybe
I
let's
see something.
Let's shift then. Let's go to Laura, and
Okay.
let's have you talk a little bit about that, or leading
Okay.
up to it.
Yeah. So about the time that we changed churches, we went to a Bible church, much less, like, I would say we moved quite a ways from the conservative branch to a more definitely moderate branch. So less, focus on like works and legalism, and a lot more just grace. And then, so there were some, kind of doctrinal and theology changes that I was learning about and going through. And then I felt like, okay, so the first time I ever remember hearing about the Mormon church, we were driving down the road in my hometown, and my sister pointed out the window and said, "That's where my voice teacher goes to church. That's where my recital's going to be." And my mom looked out the window and she said, "That's where she goes to church? You are not singing in that church." And I looked out the window and I was like, what are they doing in there? Is there animal sacrifice? Like, my curiosity was piqued for sure.
Those stopped in the 80s, by the way. I'm kidding. Keep going.
And then I went on to high school, and I guess I kind of feel like I was a little bombarded by Mormons in high school. Like, all the boys we hung out with, all of our guy friends were Mormon. And I started taking voice from the same voice teacher. I love her dearly still. And yeah, as soon as I started dating one of the Mormon boys, though, things got really interesting. Like, I'd never had a curfew before, and all of a sudden I had a curfew. And within a few weeks of me starting to date him, we went to an anti-Mormon conference, if you will. I don't know what you'd call it exactly, but it was it was a night at a Bible church, not the one I attended, but another one where they had this Christian apologist come and talk about how wrong and evil the Mormons were. So he definitely didn't use the word evil, but it was one of there was this whole thing where he went through just different random quotes and pulled them out, and you went through and you found out that eventually the angel Moroni was Satan. Like, that was his definition.
That was the big conclusion.
Right. That was the conclusion of the meeting. Like, you went through this whole kind of process with him, and that was the thing and that is who they put on the top of the temples. And so they worship Satan in the temples, was basically like the message that you got from the night. And I was super intrigued. I took extensive notes. I still have the journal that I wrote these notes in from that night. I was like fascinated because I'm dating this guy and I'm going to save him, and I'm going to like help him and find Jesus and like really be good. Right. And
he was thinking the same thing about you.
Yeah.
Sure he was. And so the big thing I remember from that night was he said, whatever you do, don't read the Book of Mormon, and whatever you do, don't pray about it. And my like radar went up. I was so just like prayer for inspiration and prayer for comfort. And I don't know anybody who prays like my mom does. Like, if you need prayers, Alan and Katie, you text me, and my mom will put you on her list, and you will be prayed for by me every day. And then she will ask me in 2 or 3 days how you're doing. Like we pray, and prayer was just a huge part of my life. And so I just remember thinking, who is this guy to tell me not to pray about anything? And it really stuck out to me. And I think that was the first moment where I was like, maybe this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. I was intrigued. Like, I was such a weird teenager. Like, I wanted to read everything I could find about the church. I had like a stack of anti-books, like the Godmakers and the Mormon Mirage, and like this other book that was just like about a bunch of cults. Sorry to use that word, everyone. It's okay. It's going to be okay. I don't worry about the word, and and where Mormons were just like a chapter in it. And
Yeah, that's how they were talked about. Yeah.
Yeah, I read everything I could get my hands on. And I started asking my voice teacher questions during our lessons. And these guys that we hung out with were like great guys. They were just good boys. And I was like, why do I have a curfew now? Like, I was so just like, it was really confusing to me, the way that the church was portrayed, and then the way that I was seeing the people that I was around live. And so, I do remember telling my voice teacher that, we thought that she wasn't a Christian or something. I can't remember exactly what I said, if it was like something about the conference or something that I'd read. And she just like bore her testimony to me, and it was really powerful to me. And I really felt like I felt the Holy Spirit, and I was like, listen, these people are wrong. Like, these are Christians. Like, they love Jesus, and maybe it's different, but like, and at that moment, I remember just like a switch kind of turning off, where I felt like I couldn't trust like the message I was getting from the church leaders I had, and etc. I asked her for a copy of the Book of Mormon, and she gave it to me, and I read it alongside my anti-Mormon books. And, and then, I was just like living my teenager life. I read most of it a couple times, like, not like a novel, but I went through it and like took notes, and I was like writing stuff in the margins about how wrong it was and things like that. And then I went to college at Baylor University, which is in Waco, Texas, big Baptist school, if you are familiar. And you have religion classes that are required there. And I was taking an intro to the New Testament class. And I also, over the summer, had kind of become introduced to a couple of just like kind of deep theology issues in the Bible church we were attending. I don't know how into that we want to get, but one thing in particular that was really concerning to me was just this idea of predestination, and that God like created some people to be saved and some people to be damned. And it just felt so contrary to my belief and the God that I knew. I was really just battling with that. I went to the bookstore and got some books from Christian theologists on it, and I still have those downstairs. And then I went to that New Testament class, and I learned a lot about how the New Testament was compiled, and just how political the process was, and all of these different apocryphal texts, and why weren't those included? And yeah, I had a mini faith crisis, if you will. I just felt like I can't trust what I've heard. I had a very literal, I'm not sure if it's how it was taught to me or how I internalized it, but my understanding of the Bible was very literal, extremely literal. Like, I was reciting Bible stories when I was like 3. It was just such a huge part of my life. And so, and I really had this idea of just like God, this, kind of Nostradamus God speaking to a prophet, and he's like kind of transfixed and then writing something down. That was how I had kind of made sense of it in my head. And so hearing this about the New Testament was really upsetting to me. And I felt like my trust in the people that had taught me was kind of cracked. And so, the guy that I was dating pretty seriously at that point, convinced me to stop reading the anti-books and to just read the Book of Mormon. And I did that. And this was about the time that he was leaving to go on his mission. And yeah, I remember I hunkered down in my dorm room with a bag of Dove chocolates and was reading in 3rd Nephi. And I was like, holy cow, I think this is true. And just really praying about it and feeling like this like overwhelming spiritual experience, but also this kind of sense of like impending doom. Like I am about to like have to ruin my whole life. Then I called the member referral line from a commercial. Like there was like a media referral line. And I was like, I want to talk to some missionaries. And you had to like put in it was like for members to refer people to the missionaries. And so you had to put in like a ward number, and I was just like entering random numbers. And then a few days later, my dorm roommate was like, sister, somebody called and handed me the message. And I kid you not, y'all, the sister missionary's phone number prefix was 666.
Come on, people.
And I was like, yeah, I'm not going to call. It was super just like, I don't think I can do this. And I think I held on to it for a week or two. And by this time, I was just like devouring anything I could get. I don't know where I got a copy of A Marvelous Work and a Wonder, but I was reading that and I was just super intrigued. And so I called the number and they said, oh, you're actually in the elders area. And I went through a lesson or two. And then this tall, lanky missionary, Elder Hunter, got transferred in.
Okay, I think that's your cue, Elder Hunter, to tell us how the next part goes.
It is, yeah. So this was about halfway through my mission at this point. So I was called to the San Antonio, Texas mission, and we went all the way up to Waco, and I got transferred in there. My companion wasn't the best communicator. Turns out we actually missed the first appointment with Laura, which I didn't know until the day after. So we stood her up. So that was a good way to start it off.
Right.
But yeah, we finally met. I think that we hit it off pretty well, pretty quick, but I quickly discovered that she was not going to be an easy investigator, as we called them back then. This was back in the days of the 6 discussions.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah, memorize.
Yep.
I didn't let him do those, by the way.
Yep. Yeah, this was the days when you memorized the 6 discussions and made their words become yours, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so you had a script that you would stick to and at least try to, and that didn't work very well for me most of the time. So the discussions usually ended up veering off into some deep discussion about eternal progression or polygamy or tithing or, why the Doctrine and Covenants is different than the Book of Mormon and all that stuff. So,
right. Cause to Laura's, in Laura's defense, she had done their homework. Like she had already been doing all the deep dive theology and Book of Mormon studying. And so that's very different than coming to someone who was fresh, never had anything.
Yes, very much so. Yeah. And being called to serve in the Bible Belt, the buckle of the Bible Belt in Texas, I was fairly well versed in answering questions about, what we would call anti-literature back then. There were whole congregations that would have, these seminars about Mormons and how they were wrong. And they would say, when the missionaries come, say this to them, and so it was, I thought I was pretty well versed in answering those questions, but Laura definitely challenged me.
I found I have like a box with all my notes and stuff from that time and just found like a lot of the like questions I'd written down. And I had this one time, do you remember when I came with like, I had mapped out like the LDS version of the plan of salvation and like how I'd grown up knowing it. And I was like, break this down for me, tell me. And I like wanted him to like.
Yeah. And I'm like, I'm still on the first discussion. So we believe in a loving Heavenly Father. Yeah. So it wasn't easy, but it was definitely interesting. And she was definitely engaged and interested, but really was not about to commit to baptism, even though she had this at least beginning of a testimony of the Book of Mormon, and had read it, several times at that point?
2.5.
Yeah. Which is not normal for an investigator also.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, as we would slowly get through the discussions, after several visits, we were, why will you not get baptized if you believe this to be true, right? But there were too many unanswered questions, in Laura's mind. And so she wasn't willing to commit to baptism, understandably. And after meeting, how many times? A lot of times. I finally just sat her down and said, "What will you pray just specifically about getting baptized?" And she did. And
I called him the next day and I was like, okay, I'm ready. And that was a Thursday. And I think I'd only actually technically been through 3 discussions, even though we'd met probably a dozen times or something by then. So they came and taught me the last 3 discussions really quickly. And he was like, I know you have more questions, but I just have to get through these. and then I was baptized that Sunday.
Yeah.
So this is 1998.
Yeah. And so it was quick. The last little bit there was pretty fast. And I mean, still to this day, I think that Laura was one of the main reasons I was called to serve there, Seemed to
He
work.
sent a letter home unbeknownst to me. And so a couple of years later to his family with a picture from my baptism and a line in the letter that said, this is your part. You did it.
I just said, I think Laura's the reason I came to Texas. And seeing the picture and seeing me write that phrase, my parents, antenna went up pretty quick, and they're like, no, but we were.
Yeah, I think they knew we were destined for connection before either of us even remotely had it on our radar at all.
Yeah, we were good though. I had a girl waiting for me back home. She had her boyfriend that was on his mission, and so we only dated on P days, right?
No dating at all. Yeah, I was pretty set on my missionary that was in Spain, and so he was not on my radar at all. Yes, he was in España.
In España.
España.
What a loser. Just kidding.
2 years before y'all, though, right?
Yeah, we were 02 to 04.
Yeah, so we're old.
So, okay, you get baptized, and what is the general feeling from your family?
It's not good. It was not a good feeling at all. And I knew that, but it was really hard. And looking back, I have so much empathy for my family and what that must have felt like. It's hindsight 2020, and so it was really hard. There was a lot of contention. One of my very close family members didn't speak to me for 6 months, and when they did start talking to me again, it was super aggressive and just really angry and challenging, and you're following Satan and you're doing the wrong thing, and just so much. That was the tone of all of those conversations. And yeah, as I mentioned, my mom's amazing, and I really understand, kind of looking back on it, why she felt the way that she did, and but it was really hard. She pulled me out of Baylor. I was apparently not taking advantage of the Christian environment, and then I moved to the University of North Texas. So that was 2 missions away from him, and he understandably was super worried, because my family was not happy at all. My dad wasn't thrilled either, but for very different reasons than like my mom and Mike. So Matt was like really worried, and he was like, "Will you write me and let me know how you're doing?" And so I wrote him like once a week. And y'all, I'm just kind of an intense person. I was writing my missionary every single day because I'm super chill all the time. Like I wrote him a letter every day. So when I wrote, I journaled every day. I wrote my missionary every day. I'm just like, when I do something, I like really do it. And, so I was writing Matt once a week. And so I think people hear that and think, oh, it was so romantic. It wasn't. And it just wasn't a big deal to me because that's just kind of, I wrote him and let him know how the insane singles ward was that I had moved to. I moved to North Texas and into this singles ward. And I was like just totally unprepared for the culture shock and the meat market environment and the like, guys just like showing up at my apartment with cheesecakes and like marriage proposals. And I was like, who are you people? Like, and it was so much like, I felt like I was kind of an intense person and really committed to my faith, but just this like, okay, so you come to the church on Monday for this, and then you're going to come for this, and then we want you to be in the choir, and then we want you to do this and this. And I remember just feeling so overwhelmed, and it felt like everything meant something different. Like the vocabulary was different. And, I was like, I'm in Texas, and I just like walk into this building and everyone is like speaking it's like you went to a different country to me, almost the way the culture was a shock for sure. I felt like, so my family was not thrilled at all. And so that led to some really difficult conversations, lots of angry fighting. I said things that I totally regret. There was a lot of, assuming that I had just done this for my boyfriend that was insane. And, which was super hurtful to me after I had, felt like I put so much just like spiritual time and energy and devotion into trying to figure out what was right. I look back at that box and I just like want to hug my 20-year-old self because I was so conflicted on what to do. And like I have always written my prayers down, and I was like, God, I don't know what to do. Like if I do this, then my family's going to hate me, and I feel like this is true, but I don't know. And I would write down all my questions, and I just felt like I tried so hard, and it just wasn't enough for anybody, really. And then I ended up sending a Dear John to my missionary in Spain, and that's a whole other story. But and then Matt finished his mission about almost a year after I was baptized.
Yeah, I had my girlfriend that waited for me. We broke up like 3 weeks after I got back.
Wow, that was
You broke
fast.
up 2 weeks after you got back. Holy cow! And
Yeah.
so Matt, like, what? And then you were like, "Oh, and I'm home, and I'm broken up with my girlfriend, and I'm gonna call Laura." How did that work?
Yeah, strangely enough, Laura was at least partially responsible for why we broke up.
I am offended.
Oh no, you should be proud, girl.
Yeah, no, I she was just, my girlfriend was just kind of ready to get married, and I was not about that.
Well, your parents came down to get you off your mission and met me.
Right.
And I didn't know it at the time, but I think his dad was like, thought that I was the girl for him.
Yeah. And my parents did come down to get me on my mission, which I guess is not kosher nowadays, but, kind of traveled around the mission with me, met a lot of people that I taught.
They took me to dinner, and he was like super awkward, and I was like, what is with this guy? He like won't talk to me or look at me or anything. You know how missionaries are with their missions, and they like don't know what to do with themselves.
Yeah.
But his parents are like the sweetest, kindest. Oh my goodness, we talked forever. And his dad was like, here's his email address, and like trying to like get us to stay in touch or whatever. And so, yeah, I don't think either of us realized it at the time, but he was totally set at that.
Yeah. which I'm grateful for. But yeah, when I got home and my girlfriend and I had just grown apart over those 2 years, even though we kept in contact with letters, you change over 2 years. And so, I did keep talking about this girl, Laura, and how well she was doing. And we were emailing each other, and there was definitely a little bit of jealousy there, and perhaps a little ultimatum, given. Um, and I was like, well, okay. And anyway, that was kind of the start of the end of that relationship. And then, yeah, once we were both single, I think things changed a little bit, although it was mostly through emails in the beginning. And then this was back in the day before there was free long distance and cell phones and all that jazz. And so
and I didn't have internet at my apartment. I had to go to the computer lab to email him. And so then it became 4-hour phone calls every night and like $400 a month phone bills.
Yeah.
Oh my.
Who's flipping that bill? Is this your parents? I hope you send it to them.
Yeah. It was your dad, our pimp.
Your mom and dad.
Oh, that's so funny.
He paid the bill. Yeah, for the most part. I do remember paying some bills on my side too, but he definitely footed most of it, I think.
Yeah. And with the time difference, it was hard because Laura had early classes and I worked late. And so we would usually talk until Laura fell asleep. And then I would hang up the phone, and then she would call back in the morning and say, I'm sorry, I don't know what you said that last little while.
Yeah. And then we got married really quickly. Like, I was, super, super reticent to get involved, when he lived so far away. But I mean, within a couple months he proposed, and then we were married. So he got off his mission in November of 99, and we were married in July of 2000. I moved to Utah, a week before we were married in the Bountiful Temple.
It sounds weird, but we did visit each other several times.
You know what?
Honestly,
it's very similar.
It's very
it mirrors
similar.
our story. I mean, that's.
So I was in California. She was in Utah. And
you got home in June.
I got home in June. We got married in December.
We moved to Utah. Yeah, very similar.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was it was an interesting, but it was I think it was a really great courtship because we really fell in love with each other without even really going on our first date or kissing each other. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think my first visit down there was Valentine's Day that February. I flew down for a few days, and then Laura flew up a couple different times. And then I went down there to movie up, basically. So.
Yeah. And so that was 21 years ago.
Wow. And tell me, was it really hard to convince your family, Laura, that this was a good idea to get married to this guy who baptized you?
Running away to Utah.
A lot of hostility. Most of my family kind of, if you like watch our wedding video, it feels like a funeral. Yeah. And looking back, I totally understand. I was moving across the country, and I was, I joined a cult in their view, and I was I was leaving them forever, and is what that felt like, I'm sure. And so I feel so much empathy for my family. And
they couldn't be there in the temple with you, right?
No, they couldn't. And that honestly kills me. It kills me now. And it was hard then.
Yeah.
And I almost broke it off because of the temple. And I did. I said, I can't do this. I can't marry you. And he kind of talked me through it. I was really worried about the temple a lot. And it was really challenging, very difficult. I could tell you 50 stories, but we won't get into those.
Right.
About that.
Well,
And then, we had a baby pretty quick, and grandchildren heal many wounds. So,
Right.
yeah. And then my mom she's such a gracious person. And so there's always been, a strain there, but like she came and sang in our church a handful of times at our ward, like, eventually. And so, it took a lot of years to kind of build bridges there and make progress with that, I think. But she really is such a, just like understanding and compassionate person that, our relationship eventually became more important than all the differences. And I'm grateful for that. It took a long time, but
Yeah.
And I think that once Laura's family saw that we weren't living like Satan worshipers and that we were having these, beautiful grandchildren and our lives were happy and Christ filled and normal, I think that broke down some walls to help.
Yeah, that's great. I'm glad that it ended up happening. It doesn't always. And yeah, I'm reminded of in week 1 of the course with Natasha. I know that you've done the go at your own pace version of that. Natasha talks about it. It's just a fascinating concept of, you look at the two different sides of how a church like the LDS church welcomes people in. And they're heroes when they join, and oh my goodness, this is so great. But then on the other side, there's a faith community that's mourning the loss of someone leaving, and oftentimes you've been betrayed, and missionaries even will warn the investigator, as you put it, Matt. We served in the days where investigator was the term, but you would warn. Yeah, I mean, you would warn people to say, look, this is going to happen. Your family's not going to understand. Sometimes we would go as far as saying like, this is Satan trying to stop you. But then, completely the opposite thing. If someone in the LDS church leaves, and goes to a different faith, the opposite is happening. They're being welcomed to the new faith as a hero, and the well done, sweet child. That's not the term, but well done. And I think that just kind of stepping back and recognizing that there are tribal dynamics at play, both good and bad, can really help. I never thought about my grandmother, for example, who never was LDS, sitting outside the temple for 6 weddings of her grandchildren. And I never once, until after she died, thought, oh my gosh, that must have been hard. I never thought about it.
You said that you had a kid pretty quick after you got married. And you did. I'm looking actually at a really beautiful picture of your family. And I don't know.
Public Facebook poster.
Yes.
Picture.
Yes.
Nothing weird.
Anyway, but I don't know if this even has to do with like your part of your shift. Even if it doesn't, I would love for you to maybe talk just for a couple minutes about how you got all your kiddos here in your family.
Okay. Yeah. It does. I think it played part for me for sure. So we had, our son and then 2 daughters, biologically, and we're just kind of living the dream. It was about our 15th anniversary. We went to Hawaii, and we both had, just separate spiritual promptings that we were supposed to adopt. And neither of us talked to each other about it. We both kind of just held on to it, because I was like, we had all these plans for things we were going to do and serve a mission and all this. And, Matt was going to retire early, and we were going to travel. And so I was really hesitant to say anything. And he knew I would be doing the lion's share of the work. So he didn't want to be like, so I think you're supposed to raise another baby.
Right.
And I brought it up to him one day, and he was like, me too. And it was kind of incredible. And so we went through a very long and arduous saga that could be a whole separate podcast episode about how we went in to adopt one child, and we got 3. And
At the same time?
Well, no, they placed two sisters with us, and we became licensed foster parents is what happened. And we learned that there's like a really significant need for Native American foster families, because of a specific federal law that makes it really crazy. And because Matt is technically Native American, we were able to provide a home for Native children. And so they brought us two little girls who were half Navajo. And at this point, our son was like, really? They're all girls? Like, there's so many girls here. I was just thinking maybe we would get a boy. They were really excited to get younger siblings. And so we got the two little girls. And there were a lot of things that happened during that totally just changed me. That I think I was a pretty black and white thinker before that. Biomom got pregnant the month that the older two daughters were placed with us. And so we knew there was a likelihood that the baby would be placed with us when she was born, also a girl. And there were some things actually that really just kind of happened that made me see how just judgmental I was and how pharisaical I was. I don't know, like a Pharisee and just my actions, I think, and expecting people to meet a certain criteria. I think there was one of my most embarrassing moments in life was when their biomom was meeting with the missionaries and decided to get baptized. And I was like, she cannot do that. Like, I knew all the stuff she was doing wrong, and I knew all the things she'd done wrong to these children that I was taking care of every day. And I was outraged. Like, I was outraged that she was doing this. And it took me, I have lots of journals where I'm just writing down and realizing, wow, is there like a standard of morality here? And it actually kind of got me thinking, because I was like, why do we have like a baptismal interview or a temple recommend interview? Isn't Jesus for everybody? Isn't he for like the sinners, like every like real sinner? Like, does she have to meet some sort of criteria before she can come to Jesus? So yeah, I do think that was a little bit of a crack in my armor, was that just experience watching people struggle in their lives in really significant ways, and how judgmental I'd been beforehand, I think. And then just trying to parent children who'd been through trauma and had big issues. So then she had the baby, they let her keep the baby, and we were kind of a mess. It looked like the girls were going to go back, and the older two girls, it looked like they were going to go back to their bio parents. And I knew just from experience that it wasn't a healthy situation, but there was nothing I could do to like prove that. And
we had fostered them for over a year at this point.
Wow.
Which is, like Laura said, it's a whole other story. Foster care is no joke.
It's not.
And we were introduced to a world that we didn't know it existed, I guess. You hear about on the movies. And like Laura said, it was eye-opening for both of us, just to kind of try to seek forgiveness, show grace for the bio parents that had traumatized these little girls that we loved so much. Yeah.
And I think that there was a really crazy day that is kind of a good like example of just our personalities. And I think even maybe how we handled my faith crisis later on, because there was a day before we were going to go to court, and no one was talking to me. The caseworker wouldn't talk to me. I finally called this worker and I was like, what is going on? And he said, it looks like they're going to send the girls home tomorrow. And I was like, they're going to leave tomorrow? And he said they could. That's what they're recommending. And I was a mess. I was a mess. We were going to lose them that day. And I had seen things happening with the bio parents that I knew weren't safe. I was super worried. And Matt and I were we own a rental home, and we were doing showings, and people were coming through when I got this phone call from this guy. And I was sitting on a chair, shaking and crying. And Matt was like, look at our kitchen. And I was like, what is wrong with you? Have you no soul, man. Like, I just couldn't even like believe he could like show our home when we just found out we were losing our kids the next day. And and then like not even an hour later, I got a call from the caseworker and she said, something's happened. We need you to take the baby. And 2 hours later, they brought me the baby sister and then like, yeah, that was the beginning of the end for the opportunity for them to go back to their bio family, which is a tragedy. I mean, it's the loss of a family, you know. It was a huge blessing and miracle, I think, because our girls are safe now and have a healthy way to live, but it is a tragedy that family broke down. And so then, you know, with 6 months later, we adopted all three of them all together. And then they were all, we were a forever family, if you will, with one son and 5 daughters. And
we got sealed in the temple, 3-4 days after
we did
adopted them. So
we did.
You know what? I just really admire you. Alan and I went and saw that movie Instant Family in the theaters. And we watched it and it was just so you could see the struggle, you could see the, you know, the wins. And when it was over, we were both crying and Alan's like, maybe we could do this. Maybe we could be a foster family. We went home and the next day it was a wild day with the kids and Alan's like, forget it. Forget what I said. that this is not for us. But, you know, that movie did a good job of like really putting it into our hearts that foster families are just so needed and special for these kiddos that, you know, that are in just the most horrible situations.
I agree. I still have days like that, for the record. Wow, I don't think I can do this, but I'm in it to win it now. So, yeah, it is. It's intense, and we love that movie. I think it gives a good and humorous picture, but it's
fairly accurate.
It addresses a lot of what it's like.
Right.
Sure. And so that definitely, I think that experience definitely shifted me some, and I think I became a lot more. I think I was always pretty nuanced, but
this was about 3.5, 4 years ago.
Yeah, we adopted the girls in 2017 is when that happened, and then we were just kind of. I wouldn't say our family was ever like orthodox because I always was sort of nuanced. I think because of my upbringing, if you will. But we were like totally all in. Like I said, if I do something, I do it all the way.
Right.
I have no choice.
Right.
So yeah, and I think I definitely had a really kind of love-hate relationship with the structure of the church, because that experience with the exorcism when I was a young teen, I think was really frightening for me. And so the structure of the church felt comforting in some respects, if you will, like this is how it is. But I was constantly coming home and like, oh my gosh, why is this a rule? Why do we have to do this? Why is this instrument okay and this one's not? And why is it like this? And poor Matt was always like, I don't know why, Laura. And yeah, I never like really accepted things at face value. It felt unnecessarily strict to me.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And we were probably known in our ward, at least, for kind of having more nuanced beliefs, especially with Laura's background. I was in the bishopric. I got called in the bishopric while we were fostering?
Right after we adopted.
Right after we adopted. Got called in the bishopric, and we were kind of on our peak kind of spiritual life at that point, I think. But even then, I think we had a little more nuanced beliefs, I think, in our home more than most true blue Mormons, right?
Yeah, for sure. We would kind of get into it sometimes with people about things
like grace, works versus grace, and
I've always been pretty mouthy, so I was I would kind of call people out sometimes. There were things that bothered me often, just comments people would make, the exclusionary vision of like, this is the only one way. And having so many people that I love being just like faithful, beautiful, amazing Christians, or even not, I was like, what? That was always a frustration to me.
Yeah.
For
sure. My niece is, what is she? She evangelical?
What niece?
Carly.
Oh, that niece. I was thinking on your side, I'm like, who are you talking about? I don't know, actually. Am I a bad uncle for not knowing?
Anyway, we went to her bridal shower, and like Mormon bridal showers are different. I've been to so many Mormon bridal showers where they're like, okay, pull out the lingerie. Let's like get all the stuff because, anyway. So before we go to her bridal shower, she said, hey, could you not bring any of that stuff? Because I wouldn't want to offend my grandmother who's going to be at this bridal shower. It's going to be very traditional. And so we were like, oh, okay. So we get there, and the first thing they do is like read from the Bible. And me and everyone else were like, oh my gosh, we were feeling really bad. And then and then we go through the bridal shower, and it just is just so beautiful, and the prayers and the singing, and I left feeling like I am the worst Christian ever. She is a better Christian than I am. And you just, unless you're exposed to that, you wouldn't really know, because we're kind of just in this bubble, right? Or if you hadn't been a missionary, you probably wouldn't have known that either. Yeah. So I really relate to that.
I think that we're going to make this a two-parter.
We are.
Honestly, I wouldn't have wanted you to not share anything. Let's see if this sentence comes out right. I'm glad you shared everything you shared. And I think what we would love to do is bring Matt and Laura back for a second part to be able to get into, okay, we've set up the family. We know how they met. Laura, we know your background. Would love to get to the next section of a little bit more about your marriage leading up to now. It just seems about a year ago when the rubber hits the road for Laura. And we can spend another 45 to 60 minutes on that in part 2. What do you think? Are you willing to come back with us?
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for having us. Sorry, we're so mouthy and verbose.
No, not at all. It's very, very good stuff. Okay. So we will see you all soon on part 2.